Today's topic is a good one, purpose. And ultimately, everything we do has purpose at its core and or lack of, right? So it's one of our core motivators is to seek a more meaningful life. So even if it's in the ordinary everyday situations, we're always looking to make sense of our life and seek meaning in that and make it worthwhile. And so much about mindfulness and meditation is learning to find that meaningfulness in the little things, in the present moment, essentially, in the right now, as opposed to these big outcomes, these big achievements, um, these big goals that we set ourselves sometimes. And that's where we kind of wind up living for the future, living for outcomes, and then we miss out on what's happening right now. There's so much opportunity to experience that meaningfulness right now, because ultimately meaning is not found in the external things. Meaning is found in feeling our aliveness, feeling the miracle of our beingness, that we exist, that we're able to connect with all that there is through mindfulness, through presence, and to be part of everything there is ultimately to be part of the meaning, is to experience yourself in the flow, it's part of the greater current, as the ripple and the drop within the ocean, to be feeling yourself as riding the wave of a greater current where we can surrender and let go and not feel like we have to control everything. That's a hard way to live when we're always trying to make things happen. And so much about purpose is learning to go with that flow and recognize what resonates. And that's our inner voice, our intuition, our gut, our instinct, our heart space, our inner divinity, our higher self, many different ways to describe that. But when something really resonates deeply within, there's an endless ocean of energy and passion and desire that opens up, and that we feel when we're connected to something that resonates. And that's not an idea in our head. It's not something we generate necessarily just from projecting, or certainly not from setting expectations, but it's rather that when we're truly engaged with what's in front of us, when we're experiencing ourselves, having an awareness of ourselves, that really is when we recognize ourselves in the external, in our environment. Because the world is always a mirror. We're always only experiencing ourselves, and it all begins with us and all ends with us. So really noticing our purpose through what resonates, and that's our blueprint deep within it. Each and every one of us has a unique blueprint, which is amazing if you think about it. No two people have like the same type of internal makeup, and our life experiences inform this purpose. And remarkably, it's the things that challenge us that ultimately become our calling, that turn into our purpose. And so to recognize that is a big step in that direction, to not be so much in resistance. Resistance was the topic of last week's session, and how that keeps us separate from the world around us, that keeps us small and isolated. And then we become closed off from seeing all the different opportunities that exist, all the different angles and perspectives that may exist. And we become just very narrow in the way we view things and experience things when we're in resistance to our environment. Because the essence of being in resistance is thinking that it should be different. We have an idea, an expectation of what a certain situation should be. And when it's different from our expectation, we're in resistance to it. We're like, it shouldn't be this way. We want it to be different. But that means we're so singularly focused on our version, our plan, not life's plan, but the way we think it should be happening. And then we don't really see the splendor of it all, the vastness of it all. So finding our true purpose, and there's many different purposes that we have in our lifetime. Some people, maybe they're just born to be a genius musician, piano player, or a coder, hacker, or they've always wanted to be an astronaut and they literally become an astronaut. But probably I'd say for most people, there's different chapters in life, because even the astronaut has a chapter after all the moon flights, and there's parallel purposes, I would say, as well. So it's not such a simple idea that you just do one thing. We have our professional lives, some of our personal situations intertwined with that as well. And again, we're driven by these hopes and desires to ultimately be better people and make more of our life. And the test becomes of what voice are we really listening to? Are we listening to our inner voice, that which really truly deep down resonates? Or are we being led by these external voices of what we should be doing or what we could be doing, and the what ifs, and the living for that point in the future when we think it all comes together, when we'll finally be happy? And part of the journey for most people is to keep living that way, keep seeking that moment in the future when happiness finally arrives, because all the pieces come together. And to then only realize that life is always evolving, it's always changing. The pieces might come together for a moment, for a little bit, but everything is in movement. It's ever changing. The nature of life is change. So that happiness isn't a permanent one, even if it does arrive. And most often, the twists and turns of life take us down a different path. And so we then slowly recognized, well, we can't make life stand still in exactly the configuration that we want it to be in order to be happy. So what can we do to really find that happiness and that fulfillment? And that's when we start to turn more inside, become more internal, to recognize, well, the one thing that we have 100% control over is how we feel, what we give our attention to, what thoughts, the things we entertain in our daily life, our daily structure. There are some things that are more or less requirements because of just the way the societies we live in, but there's still a lot of say in there of what we engage with. And most of us find that the beaten path, the prescribed path, is not very satisfying. And so we then find ourselves wondering and confronted with, well, what do I do? And having to carve out your own happiness, your own path to fulfillment. And that can be challenging, at first at least, because there's no formula, at least from externally prescribed. But there is an inner GPS that we have, and that's, again, our blueprint. That blueprint is what resonates when we encounter people, places, and things that truly resonate, ideas that really captivate us, inspirations, motivations that touch us in a way where we're like, I've got to do that. And we don't think about the how. We're not turned off by the effort it might take. we know something resonates. And so there is really no work involved, no effort involved. It's more like you want to do that. You're being called to do that. You'll do whatever it takes to inhabit that because it's you. It speaks to you so deeply that we don't question it. The things that we do question is these ideas that we might have that, true to our monkey mind, one moment it's one thing, next moment it's another, and then we start doubting ourselves, and fear and anxiety arise. And those things don't happen when we're really connected to our true calling, our true purpose. There's still obstacles, of course, but there's this realization of, what else would I be doing? I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. I have to do this. I am being called to do this. And there's always an element of growth and discomfort that comes with that. And that's kind of a telltale sign of when something's a true calling. It isn't necessarily super pleasant. It could be exciting, but it usually demands that we grow into it, that we take action to evolve and step into that place of personal power. It's not just so easy to just kind of like, oh, I just found my purpose and I'm all set. Pursuing that purpose becomes essential part of the journey. And the important thing, again, even if there's an outcome with this purpose, it's more of an experience of the day-to-day. It is the journey of going down a particular path, and every day on that path is your purpose. Again, it's not an end goal necessarily. And we keep evolving there, and the difference is ultimately is that there's a deeper trust that we're operating on, because we just feel our inner truth in such a way that we don't question it. And usually things that are just kind of flippant ideas, we tend to question those very quickly, and there's a lot of anxiety in there, and there's a lot of self-doubt. And when you're really operating with like, I'm meant to do something, then that isn't the case. So ultimately the question is, how do we differentiate between our inner voice and these outer voices that we've been in large part programmed to listen to and believe in? We spend so much of our life trying to sift through what's actually us versus what's something we've been imprinted with. And that might have been, well-meaning voices of our parents or teachers, our environment. And then, of course, there's the media and peer pressure and so forth. Many different outside voices that, because we're so young, when we get immersed in that, we kind of grow up and are unsure of, well, what's truly me versus something I picked up from somewhere else. And this is where our mindfulness practice and our meditation comes in again, is to help us come out of the noise of that mind, because those outside voices all live in the headspace, as I call it. And anything goes in there. It's one moment it's one thing, next moment it's another. There's depression and doubt and anxiety and fear. All of that is when we're just in the head, because the head mainly operates on past and future. Mind is really uncomfortable with the present moment. It doesn't know what to do with it, because it's always looking to know and control things. And when we practice, through our mindfulness practice, becoming more and more present, the mind loses its purpose. There's just less and less to really know right now, because you're in the experience of now versus in these stories of past and future. So the more we become present, the more the mind starts to feel useless. And at first, when you're just starting out in your mindfulness practice, that can become a little difficult to deal with a mind that is essentially realizing that it's losing its grip, its control over you. And because that's what we're doing, we're wresting control back from this dominant mind that we've been conditioned to live by and live through. And rather, we're now retraining ourselves, it's where we came from, to connect with what's the only thing that's real, which is right now, which is what's in front of us, and feel that, respond to what's there, as opposed to reacting to an idea about what should be there, what we think should be there and should happen, but rather to actually see what is, see it as it is, and then notice, does it resonate or not? And then the most important step is when we notice when something resonates or it doesn't, then we, of course, have to take action. Mindfulness is not about just feeling your feelings and letting life step all over you, being a doormat. The opposite is the case. It's about becoming highly efficient and intelligent in a way to seeing things as they are. So not coloring it with what we want it to be, not generating resistance to what is happening, but rather really observing it as it is, and then noticing through our inner blueprint of what resonates and what doesn't, where we want to take that situation. We want to lean into that and let that guide us. This is where we start to let life guide us into the direction of our purpose, as opposed to trying to generate this and then following an idea. Two very different experiences. And when something doesn't resonate, we also can take clear action. Buddhists call this right action, so that we don't spend more time on something that isn't for us. And so we become just much clearer, more efficient, path of least resistance. We see things from multiple perspectives, multiple opportunities that are showing themselves, because we're not insisting on reality being a certain way, the way we want it to be, but we're actually experiencing it as it is. And there's so much more in this picture of as it is than in the singular vision of what we want it to be. Sometimes it feels paradoxical. We think we can imagine our greatest life, but it's actually the opposite. Our mind cannot possibly imagine our greatest life. And anyone that's lived for, a few years or more will be able to reflect back and go, well, my life didn't happen the way I expected it to at all. Things happened that were so I could never have made up, I could never have predicted. And there's really this vastness in there, this beauty of the miracle of life happening in ways that you don't know how it could. And we wouldn't want to know and predict how life unfolds anyhow, because it's a very boring existence when everything just happens exactly like you wanted and like you expected. It's just not the nature of life. The nature of life is to be okay with this great unknown of the future, of your future, and allow that to guide you into the greater picture of your purpose. And some people might say, well, Chris, isn't that just floating aimlessly? It's not. When things resonate, you start to see a direction that forms. When you're following in a bigger way, not just a few little hits here of intuition, but you start to really see where it's taking you. This bigger picture of who you're meant to be and how you're meant to apply your time starts to emerge from this unknown. Again, the inner blueprint is the GPS to all of this. Not the mind of trying to control and steer your way through it to reach some kind of outcome that we're living for, but rather to really be attentive and tuned into what's happening right now, because all the possibilities of life exist in that moment of now. That's when we're not thinking and we're just experiencing, we're feeling, and we're able to observe from a place of awareness what is presenting itself, and then acting from a place of resonance in terms of taking steps, taking action on what's presenting itself. We're not taught to operate like this at all, so it takes a little practice when we've been living life a certain way for so long, so many years, decades. And we're all here because we, to some level, degree, or another, have realized, well, that other way just isn't very fulfilling. That other way is all about nurturing the external, living for those outcomes. And we never really spend time nurturing ourselves, looking within ourselves, getting to know ourselves, spending time with ourselves in solitude. We're so afraid of loneliness, when really your relationship with yourself is the primary relationship that we have in this life, and it's the relationship that we bring into every situation. Doesn't matter where we go, we can change jobs, change cities, change relationships. We're always bringing ourselves with us. So even if we go somewhere else for a change of scenery, before long, you find yourself recreating the same life that you had before. Maybe some of the variables are a little different if you're in a different location, but ultimately it's the same experience, because you're filtering everything through the same lens as before. That same lens of steering and controlling and trying to predict the future. So coming out of all of that takes a little effort, but it takes surprisingly little effort. Those who have been to my retreats are a testament to, within 3 days, ultimately, of a safe, nurturing environment where we spend the mornings in noble silence, and we spend the middle of the day in conscious activities, and then end that with community and sharing and a little more meditation and self-care. And you do that for a few days, away from the noise of the daily life, and it already returns us back to this natural state. And I always say, mindfulness is returning us to the way we're supposed to be operating, which is to feel our feelings fully, without judging them, without injecting ourselves into an onset of a feeling, and then we push it down because we don't like it, it's unpleasant, or we cling to it because we like it and it's pleasant. We're interrupting the natural flow and the natural motion of feelings. They arise and they pass, they come and they go. Same thing with thoughts. So we're only really resetting ourselves to the way we're designed to operate, is to engage with what's in front of us right now, feel what resonates, and then take clear action on that. So that's kind of the rational understanding of what discovering one's purpose is all about. From that, you can derive that it's great to kind of get it mentally, intellectually, but then the implementation of it is key. It's the important second step, is practicing that presence, practicing not projecting into a situation, practicing not reacting to our thoughts and feelings that may arise as a result of a particular situation, if we're stuck in that reactivity, that ultimately is the resistance to the situation, then we never come out of that reactivity long enough to be able to observe what's there, to be able to have enough space within us to feel what resonates and what doesn't. Because our mind is full of chatter, or we're reacting to a feeling of, often lack and doubt and criticism and judgment. And these are the things that get in the way of seeing what's actually there. We're no longer experiencing what's in front of us. We're reacting to a feeling within us. And that's how we wind up repeating old patterns, is we keep reacting to the sensations that arise in our body. And hence, the second part of the session is dedicated to our meditation practice of focusing our mind through breath work and thought awareness, and then scanning our body to really connect with our sensations that are always happening. We're alive. We're biochemical, electrical machines that are just completely alive all the time and engaging. There's 7 trillion cells in us, and they're all active and working on making us who we are. And there's so much collaboration there and so much activity. It's amazing. And so to feel one's aliveness, that in itself is a purpose, if you will. And then the secondary, the external purpose just flows from that. So how we start to apply ourselves is, again, only a reflection of our relationship with ourselves, with our thoughts and feelings. And the more we come out of that noisy headspace and into the calm groundedness of our body, where we feel the resonance and we have that inner voice. It's a voice. It talks to us. This situation is for me. It's not for me. I should, probably send that email now as opposed to waiting. And it becomes clear and more amplified, and it becomes a voice that can guide us through all day long, not just here and there. So that's my talk on that subject. All right, very good. Thank you, Linnell. So unless there's any questions or any specific life situations, let me check the chat here. Camera off, that's okay. Then, oh, yes, Linnell.
Just getting started again in this kind of a practice, and so much of your world and your life is not in this same frame of mind. It really feels like your head spins, and you find that place in the privacy of your home. Then you go outside into the world and it just snaps back. It seems like it's self-defeating or very schizophrenic. So I don't know if it's a question, but that's what I have to say.
Yes. And that's the experience. It is a big shift from how we're raised to and conditioned, how the mind is conditioned to react to things. And we live in a world that is constantly looking to elicit a reaction from us, right and wrong, good and bad, true or false, for us, against us. And so we live in this reactivity, and our mind is consumed by that reactivity, and subsequently we are consumed by the mind. And so it takes a little bit to rewire that. The trick is to and that's where working with our sensations is so important, is to stay connected to our feelings in a way where we want to create a gap to just that snap reaction that you're talking about to the external, but it doesn't come from somehow not reacting to the external. It's noticing that we're reacting to the feeling that arises in response to the external. And I know in our sessions, we've talked about how the same external input, the mind interprets it a certain way, and that interpretation then shows up as a sensation in our body. That's why two people witnessing the same exact situation will have two different interpretations of it, because they have a different life they've lived. So the way to create that gap and come out of that snap instant reactivity is not by working with the external or the people, places, and things that are triggering you, but to work with the sensation, because that's something you can actually focus on. And more importantly, it's within the framework of your own body. So all our experiences, all our truth ultimately is what we can experience within ourselves. And that's where it begins and ends. The work is with ourselves, ultimately. You can even go as far as saying, well, those external people, places, things that trigger us, that we kind of instantly go into reaction to, well, they're going to keep coming. There are teachers. And if it's one variation, there'll be another variation. And so it's kind of, it's okay that that's happening, because it's all pointing to something within us. So the focus becomes really within yourself, and hence the meditation practice. It's gradual, but it builds up consistently, and it's a permanent kind of rewiring of the mind, so that it comes out of the instant reactivity, which is you reacting to your feeling. And that's the point of awareness, and that's ultimately the core teaching that the Buddha contributed to the world, is to give us the point that we can focus on, where we can break the reactive cycle, that loop. So in the meantime, it's something you just keep trying, and the less frustration we can, because frustration is a reaction as well, right? It's like, I'm not seeing it, it's not happening, why is this person causing this? There's resistance and all that. So the practice is the feeling triggered. The practice is the noticing your own resistance. So it's actually not, it's happening, right? As you're feeling triggered by this thing, it's actually happening. That is the practice. And not when you just sit down, at home or be in meditation. It's the application of real world, that where the rubber meets the road. And so it's actually happening. You're in the training program, if you will, when you feel triggered. It's not pleasant. And the best and fastest way to accelerate the mindfulness component here is to be at peace with the fact that you're feeling triggered so instantly. If you can find peace, this is the best opportunities. You're already noticing that you're feeling triggered, and to be at peace with that, to make peace and surrender to that, I'm triggered. And that's already a big piece in this journey, because the acceptance of what is at the root of all of this, right? And the acceptance of the moment of feeling triggered is, I'm feeling triggered. And that's hopefully that takes some of the weight off, and some of the kind of the pressure that we put ourselves under. And so it's a great opportunity to actually practice when we feel triggered, just to be okay with it. Okay. All right. And let me check the chat here for another one. I go back to negativity, a negative loop. mind chatter again and again and become sad and frustrated. Yeah, well, that's what we are just talking about, is the reaction to the present moment being different than you want it to be. You have an idea of where you want your attention to be, you have an idea of how you want to be feeling, and you're noticing that the reality of right now is different, meaning your mind is noisy, your attention is not where you want it to be, you're in that chatter, and the judgment, that self-judgment that flows from that, the sadness, the frustration, why can't I control my mind? This is a resistance, a form of resistance to right now, to see it as it is. And same thing applies, just use that, see it, reframe that as, the sooner I can make peace with my frustration, with my sadness of that the present moment is not the way I want it to be, the sooner you come out of that, the sooner the less you linger on right now, the less you amplify the fact that it's not what you want it to be, the sooner you then actually move through it. You can let go of that more quickly. It's not an on-off switch, but you'll stew in that frustration less long, and the intensity of the frustration, the sadness will get less and less, and we get to the point where, like, oh, it's not the way I want it to be. Path of least resistance is shifting my attention to what I do want it to be, or taking action so that it is what becomes what I want it to be, and so forth. So we want to just come out of that reactive energy that doesn't benefit anyone, at least of ourselves. I live in a situation that I don't want, I don't like it, but I have no choice. How to love a situation that we don't want. So there's incredible peace when we're surrendering to what is. That's kind of the first step. There are situations where maybe for some time period or for a while, we won't be able to get out of it immediately. It could be a job, it could be a relationship, it could be you're a teenager, you can't leave the home. There's many situations where we just can't get out of it from one moment to the next. And in most of those situations, we're not meant to get out of it immediately, in the sense that there's still a lesson to be learned there. And we won't really know what we're meant to do unless we make peace with what is first. We can't really invite change into the situation that we want so dearly unless we make peace with what is first. So you don't necessarily need to love it so much, but you have to make peace with it so that you come out of resistance, so that you can start seeing things for what they are. And then from that place, you can take action. If you take action from a place of reactivity, it's never good action. It's too myopic and too it's kind of toxic, the reactive energy. It's divisive, it creates destruction. So you want to be equanimous, a clear-headed place. And from that clear-headed place, you just see more options. You see opportunities you didn't see. You might, if you're dealing with other people, you might also bring change into the dynamic as well, because you're no longer in resistance to it. When we're in resistance to family members, we want them to be different, we want them to be like us, then that is actually 50% of the dynamic, is us keeping the situation in place the way it is because of our resistance to it, our resistance to them. So again, accepting situation as it is the first important step to breathing space into the situation, taking the resistance out of the situation, and then that situation is allowed to flow. And you just don't know how it will flow until you come out of resistance to it. And normally when things start to flow again, there's just a goodness in that life is allowed to move again. When it gets stuck, resistance is causing things to just stay stale and stuck, and the lack of motion and movement and life force in and of itself is not very conducive to joy and ease and happiness and creativity and inspiration. All that shuts down when we're in resistance to a situation. And what we resist persists. This is a topic from a last session. So we have to learn to accept and not resist the situation, and that will invite change. And then from there, you have to see what you're called to do. So, great question. All right. Okay, with that said, just to stay on schedule, we will then proceed to our guided meditation. If everyone is good with that, yes? All right. So we will start with thought awareness, which is focusing on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. We'll do that for a few minutes, and then I'll take us through a full body scan. And yes, I will send out a recording of this session and all the previous sessions as well. There's a follow-up email that goes out after an hour or two. So with that said, let's get into a comfortable position. And with our eyes and mouth closed, let's focus on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. If you have trouble locating your breath, you may breathe slightly harder once or twice. And then return to natural breath, normal breath. Let the detail of the breath pull you in closer. Notice the temperature of the incoming breath. And notice the temperature of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pace of the incoming breath. Notice the pace of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. And whenever you find that your mind has wandered, simply notice it. And with as little frustration as possible, bring your attention back to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. Now gradually bring your attention to the top of your head, your crown chakra, an area about the size of your fist. And notice any sensations that may arise. It could be a tingling sensation or a tickly sensation, a prickly sensation or a pulsating sensation, a sensation of ants crawling, feeling of pressure or of lightness, of hot or cold. Any sensation is a valid sensation. No need to look for a particular sensation. Simply observe what is. And if you feel no sensation at all, that's all right too. Now gradually move your attention to your forehead. And move around to the left side of your head. And come around to the back of your skull. And around to the right side of your head. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now moving into your right eye socket. And across to the bridge of your nose. And on to the left eye socket. Moving down to your left cheek. And over to your lips. And on to the right cheek. And down to your chin. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now continuing down to your throat. And coming around to the left side of your neck. Around to the back of the neck. The right side of your neck. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now moving down into your right shoulder. And down into your bicep. And around to the tricep. And down into the back of your elbow. And around to the inside of your elbow. Moving down to the inside of your forearm. And the outside of your forearm. And now moving your attention into the back of your hand. And around to the palm. And now into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention into your left shoulder. Moving down into your left bicep. And around to the tricep. And down into the back of the elbow. And around to the inside of the elbow. Moving down into the inside of your forearm. And then the outside of your forearm. Now moving your attention to the back of your hand. And around to the palm of your hand. And into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper back and slowly, evenly scan left to right. Moving down to your right middle back, slowly, evenly scan right to left. Moving down to your left lower back, slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper chest and slowly, evenly scan left to right. Moving down to your right rib cage, slowly, evenly scan right to left. Moving down to your lower left stomach, slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now move your attention down to your root chakra, the area above your pubic bone. Gradually move your attention over to your left hip. And around to the left butt cheek. And on to the right butt cheek. And on to the right hip. Moving our attention down into our right thigh, first the front. And then the back. Moving down to the back of our knee. And around to the front of the knee. Moving down to our right shin. And around to the calf. And now starting with the heel, slowly, evenly scan across the bottom of your foot. Come around to the top of your foot. And now move your attention deep into your toes, all the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left thigh. And around to the back. Moving down to the back of your knee. And around to the front of the knee. And moving down into your left shin. And around to the calf. And now starting with the heel, slowly, evenly scan across the bottom of your foot. And come around to the top of your foot. Now move your attention deep into your toes, all the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. When you feel ready, you may gradually open your eyes. Notice your environment. Notice yourself in your environment. Notice any sensations in your body. Notice your aliveness. Ah. I've heard comments in the past that the technique is a little mechanical. it comes across as a little cold. And as far as techniques are concerned, there's some truth to that. Because what we're doing is we're coming out of the clinging and the resisting to our feelings. And so this desiring of, no, I always want to feel, a yumminess, I want to feel warmth, all that, that's part of our clinging and controlling how we feel. And it's shifting out of that to allow our environment to inform what resonates and what doesn't. And that's a much bigger and deeper experience. We don't get caught up in, oh, I'm not feeling pleasant sensations right now, so I'm going to be sad or frustrated, like someone mentioned earlier. The world out there is so vast. And to be connected to that vastness is a much bigger experience of life. Well, with that, I thank everyone for joining this Sunday session. It's always special to come together and practice. Even when we're in stillness, you can feel each other's presence, and it amplifies the experience and makes it much more powerful. So thank you for all the beautiful comments.